that I thought was to be described in language that I wouldn't use on a family program.
In the Parliament today, you described the government's emissions trading scheme as a giant emissions trading scam. If so, if it is a giant scam, then it's a giant scam originally introduced by the Howard government with you in his cabinet, and until 2 months ago, it was supported, a giant scam supported by the then Liberal leader and the vast bulk of the shadow cabinet, including the man who stood beside you today as your environment spokesman, endorsing this plan. Why did John Howard, Peter Costello and Malcolm Turnbull in government, and more recently the Liberal shadow cabinet, support an emissions trading scam?
Kerry, I think the world has moved on, particularly since Copenhagen. The world has moved on. The only person who hasn't moved on is Kevin Rudd. And, you know, with his emissions trading scheme, Kevin Rudd is now in a terrible bind. He can't drop it, and yet he can't deliver it. Kevin Rudd has no plan B. If his scheme can't pass the Senate, and it won't pass the Senate, the coalition has a clear and effective climate action plan. Kevin Rudd doesn't.
Well, Malcolm Turnbull's still not convinced because he told the party room today that your plan's not credible. And your plan, for instance, your plan to sequester carbon...
he was talking about the long term.
So in the short term it's credible, but not the long term.
I mean, we are trying to deliver, and we can deliver clearly on what was produced today. We are trying to meet our commitment and the government's commitment of a 5% cut in emissions by 2020, and we can do that.
You plan to sequester carbon in Australian soils. Your plan to sequester carbon may reduce our carbon emissions, but it's not recognised by the Kyoto Treaty. How will you make up the extra cuts in emission if the global community continues not to recognise it? Will taxpayers have to fund that too?
Well, if it is a reduction in emissions, that's what matters, not what Kyoto says.
So you'd be going on your own recipe for how you measure the targets, not a global measure.
But let me finish, Kerry. Under the proposed Waxman-Markey bill in the United States, it is recognised, and I'm confident that if we are going to get global progress here, it will have to be recognised.
You are making a virtue of 20 million trees over the next decade, and if we accept that that's a saving of carbon emissions, then I guess any extra tree planted is a virtue. But the Hawke government, to put it in context, the Hawke government initiative back in, I think, 89 or whenever it was, saw eventually 400 million trees planted. You'd plant 40 times fewer and sell that as a significant virtue. Now, I wonder, is it really that great?
Well, I'm not saying that's the whole of our policy. It's just an aspect of our policy. And I'm not saying that that is at the heart of our carbon dioxide emission reductions aspect of the policy. But it's worth doing, because more trees, more urban forests, more green corridors make for more livable suburbs, more livable towns, and I think it's worth doing.
Mr Abbott, we look forward to the debate that's going to follow over the course of this year, but thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Kerry.